So welcome everyone to today's session. So we have a nice lineup of speakers to join us today. But before I jump into that, I just want to do a quick welcome. So thanks to everyone for joining. And before we jump over to our discussion, I just want to give you a good breakdown of the folks that are joining today. So we have a wide range of people from various locations. We typically see most joining from the US and UK regions, which are taking up a good deal there, but also from Greece and from Ireland and South Africa. So a nice split across the locations dialing in. And then if we look at the same split by industry, so our usual industries that join our webinars in terms of retail and financial services and the tech industry. So a great mix of folks joining in for the discussion around AI and customer experience. So before I hand you over to our moderator today, Panos, we are recording this, so we'll be able to share it out. So it'll be available both on the Moveo.ai and Scorebuddy websites. And we also have some time dedicated at the end for some questions. So hold off your questions. We do have a questions pane within GoToWebinar. Feel free to add them there as we go through the different discussions, and we'll get to those questions at the end, so don't worry. Okay, so moving off. So I want to hand you over to our moderator today, Panos. So Panos, if you can unmute your line, and if you want to do yourself an introduction, and then also introduce our two speakers, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Panos. I'm part of the marketing team here at Moveo, and we'll discuss about AI and CX and how it can improve businesses and enterprises. And if Panos and Derek, would you like to talk a bit about you and what your experience is in the field?
Of course. Thank you, Panayota. My name is Panos. For those that do not know me, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Moveo.ai. Engineer by training, spent many years in the United States, actually working with state-of-the-art NLP algorithms, and I'm very happy to be here today discussing with all of you the future of LLMs in customer experience. And I think we have very interesting topics to discuss today.
Thanks, Panos. My name is Derek Corcoran. I'm founder and CEO of the company behind Scorebuddy. My background is more on the business and consultancy side. So operationally, I've supplied technology into the contact center and CX space for many, many years. And this is probably the biggest disruptive technology event in my experience in terms of CX. So from that point of view, it's a really exciting time and a great time to expose and dive into this topic.
Thank you so much, both. And before we dive into the first topic, which is the importance of using private LLMs, David, could you run a small poll in the audience so we can get started a bit?
Yeah, before we do that, Panos, do we want to walk through just a couple of slides on Panos?
Yeah, sure. Pano, before we start talking about LLMs and what they mean, could you give us a small explanation about what they are, basically?
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be speaking a lot about LLMs, and I think it's only fair to spend a couple of minutes just trying to describe what they do. LLMs, for those that do not know, is basically a type of neural network, right? A neural network that is very good at understanding and generating language. And has been trained on vast amounts of data. As of recently, past couple of years, it has been very popularized mostly by ChatGPT, doing the first release of LLMs out there and being extremely efficient and effective. But LLMs is essentially the technology behind ChatGPT and the technology behind other tech leaders like OpenAI, such as the technology behind Gemini or Bard or Llama 2 and 3 that have come out recently. So we're going to be speaking a lot about LLMs and Gen AI, and maybe one thing that is of interest, and it's probably the $1 million question, is that is there going to be ever a trend that one LLM rules every use case? And obviously we at Moveo at least believe that this is not the case, and that's why we're building LLMs specific for customer experience. And we believe that if you look at it from a broader perspective, that there's going to be LLMs specific for each use case. So in the next slide, we kind of ran a very interesting experiment where obviously we're going to be sharing this data with everybody in a much more detailed report. But this is essentially us trying to grade the LLM that we built specific for customer experience against GPT-4, and we ran it through some production data that we have from customers, actual conversations, and grade them on different, let's say, dimensions that are important for customer experience. And what ended up happening is that we observed that LLMs specifically built for customer experience perform much better in terms of hallucinations. They tend to not repeat themselves so much. They disambiguate on ambiguous input and so forth. So there is clearly a lot of a big need to develop LLMs specific for applications on specific data. And on top of that, regardless of, let's say, the metrics, there is always the benefit in the enterprise of being enterprise grade and reliant. So private LLMs and kind of help with high SLAs and things like that. Probably if some people from the audience are users of ChatGPT, they experienced an outage a couple of months back that lasted 6 or 7 hours. But not only it's a qualitative discussion, but it's also a little of a quantitative discussion as well of hey, a private LLM is a smaller LLM that is trained on a specific use case, which is the customer experience use case that we're going to be discussing today. So it's much faster. So normally from our gradings, we realize that our LLMs are 4.5 times faster than GPT on the average case, and this can go even like up to 6 times in the worst case scenario. So there's definitely a lot to be discussed, and I'm very happy to be here and excited about all the things that we're going to be addressing today.
Thank you, Panos. Before we start addressing them, David, could you run the first poll to get some responses?
Yeah, we'll do it, no problem. So I'm just going to put the follow-up. So we have 3 areas that we're going to discuss before we run each. And we just want to launch a poll to get your input on that. So hopefully everyone can see on the screen the first poll. So, and I'll just run through the question. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds to vote on that. So are you currently using AI for customer service in your organization? So I can see people voting away, quite a mix of results so far. So I'll give it another few seconds. And then what we'll do is we'll share the results of the poll and maybe ask Panos and Derek for their input. Are they surprised by it, or are they in line? Okay, I think that's probably towards it. Okay, so still a couple of votes coming in. Okay, let me do that. I'll end that there. So I'm going to end the results, and hopefully you can see the results on it. So Derek, Panos, thoughts on that? Surprised or?
Yeah, not overly surprised. I think what's jumping out at me actually is the 20% saying yes extensively. That's impressive for those companies and organizations that are actually obviously fully committed and fully invested in the technology, right? 45%, 50%, no, or we are planning to implement soon. That's what we're seeing in our customer base. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's looking for a kickoff project that they can get their arms around and prove the use cases out. So overly, I'm not surprised by the results, apart from that yes extensively number there, which is really impressive.
Exactly, and from my side, I agree with Derek. I'm not surprised either. I think what we observe in that poll is that a lot of people want to use it. They're amazed by it. But when we're talking in an enterprise setting, it's not as simple. We have to be very, very careful about all the pitfalls and the guardrails that an LLM or Gen AI needs to have to be production ready. and hopefully we can shed some light on best practices and common mistakes that enterprises make. So it's going to be very interesting for those people.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. So my first question is towards Derek, and I'd like to ask you, what do you think are the primary advantages of using private LLMs for customer interactions compared to traditional customer service methods?
Okay, so I suppose the way I look at LLMs is, they're gigantic hyper search engines, right? That interact with us or with platforms in a humanistic and a human-like way, right? Using language as the primary mechanism. They're scalable. They tend to be consistent, and it depends on how you apply them within the CX environment, right? So I suppose I'm talking about it from the point of view of either interacting with customers who are looking for customer service, or from the point of view of our perspective, which is quality assessment within the contact center, and how do we use these LLMs to affect that or to deliver that, right? So automation is the key one. I think there's, for the right use cases, there's huge potential for automation. They're multilingual out of the box, which is amazing. We almost take it for granted, but we can feed in data. We can ask questions in one language and get answers in a different language. So it's phenomenal from that perspective. They have the potential, again, with the right use cases, to reduce costs. However, our view is they won't replace humans, certainly either on the agent side or in the evaluator side completely, right? So there needs to be that balance. And I suppose the other aspect is that LLMs, if they're used in the right way, they generate huge amounts of data, and that data then can be put to work and can be analyzed, and we can identify trends that we can leverage off and create positive change in our organizations. So broadly, those would be the headlines.
Pano, any take on that?
I absolutely agree with Derek. If an enterprise uses LLMs correctly, they can bring tons of value. The benefit, let's say, of being private, in the sense that you're having your LLMs targeting a specific domain, it has to do mostly with maybe cost reduction, because you don't have to pay a third-party provider, or privacy and IP laws. Topics are around that mostly, and latency and maybe performance that you get out of it. And that's probably what the previous slide was trying to exemplify. I don't believe there is, or there's going to be anytime soon, that's the bet we're making, a silver bullet, one size fits all kind of case. What we will see is emerging specific LLMs for specific use cases in the near future.
Panos, could you share some examples or case studies where businesses have successfully implemented private LLMs to enhance their interactions?
Right. I mean, from our point of view, at least Moveo's side, we specialize in customer experience, right? So I have seen a lot of organizations adopting Gen AI, and mostly the common traits that I have observed, looking from our point of view, let's say, is those enterprises that are very high contact, let's say they're trying to automate some of that repetitive, let's say, kind of questions around customer support. We've seen huge traction in fintech, in financial services more broadly, let's say, where LLMs, especially private ones, right, ones that guarantee certain levels of security and do not hallucinate, can actually go a step beyond a simple how-to question, what we call a RAG chatbot. They can go mostly also in replying to personalized questions, like transaction status and what happened with my deposit. I did X, Y, and Z and it didn't work. So yeah, those are some examples that I have seen where Gen AI really delivers a lot of value in automation, as Derek mentioned before.
Yeah, I suppose from our point of view, that aspect of the data, being inside the platform or outside of the platform, right? So obviously from a scoring point of view, when we're doing quality assessments, some of the questions that the evaluator typically would be adjudicating for, that data resides somewhere else, or it may be institutional knowledge that is not obvious in the conversation that we're analyzing. So that aspect of the private LLM, it comes up in every conversation from a security point of view. So, CIOs are worried about passing data to a third party generally, and specifically if it's a public LLM that potentially could use that data to train. So those sort of questions are coming through when we're having project conversations with our client base. So where's my data? A private LLM is going to secure your data much more effectively. Okay, and the LLM that we use for doing the scoring is actually in an enclosed space, and we can absolutely testify to that and certify that. The other aspect, like I say, is that if I've got 25 questions in a typical scorecard, maybe 50% of those are about the conversation. Another 50% could be about, well, did the agent follow the right process? Were they compliant with data protection? Did they do this? Did they do that? And if we can't see that in the context of the conversation, we have to look for that somewhere else. And that's what Panos is referring to there as RAG or AG. That's taking a reference point from a piece of information. It could be a knowledge base article, it could be a standard operating procedure, and it's bringing that into the conversation so that we can adjudicate it. So there's some challenges around that. Who keeps that data? Do they keep it up to date? Is it relevant all the time? So it's not as simple as black and white, but the private LLM makes that much easier.
And what future developments do you see in the field, and how they might impact those interactions? Derek, that's for you.
That wasn't good. I think there's going, the big platform players, right, that Panos mentioned earlier, they're leaning into this, and they're providing mechanisms to fine tune or to isolate elements of their platform to mimic what looks like a private LLM. But it may not be sector specific. It may be a bit more general in its approach. And it also needs skills in-house in the organization that's using it to fine tune it for an insurance company or for a healthcare, operation, right? So I think you're going to see some product offerings coming out from the platforms. You'll also have probably a layer of third-party tuners and fine tuners and who will be making services available. But I suppose at a vendor level, from our perspective, we're looking at it from the point of view of a private LLM that's fine tuned for customer service use cases, okay? And to get the response rates, the accuracy and the security all nailed down for those types of use cases. And I think that, that's probably the trend and the direction we're certainly going as an organization.
So Panagiotis, I think you're on mute, but you probably were referring to me, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yes. So from my point of view, I think we have already kind of started to see some amazing developments in terms of what the future of LLM would look like, with multimodal LLMs being introduced with the GPT-4o, for example. But these are kind of generic traits. If I were to speak mostly about private LLMs or vertical specific LLMs, I would say it's very hard to guess. I wish I had the crystal ball, but I would say that we're moving towards that paradigm of what people refer to as action LLMs or LLM agents, or however you want to call it. It's basically the ability of the LLM to use tools and go far beyond a simple RAG chatbot. A RAG chatbot, you can probably solve 50% of your problems by restructuring your documentation, right? Let's be honest. But it's cool. It has other kind of benefits, yes. But a game changer is going to be an LLM that can interact with tools. It can have access to your database or to your API or to a calculator and do sorts of very, very interesting things. That I believe is the future. In the short term. Long term, it's very hard to imagine how it would look like. But that's also the paradigm that we're pushing for, that LLM agent. Yeah.
So you think that these are some of the emerging technologies and trends that will impact the interactions?
Exactly. Exactly. So LLMs will definitely, if you look at it from a point of view of LLMs, like pure LLMs, what we have observed in the past couple of months is not as radical as what we observed at the beginning, right? So what we observed is larger context. We started with 32K, now we're up to 120K. That's like a book almost. So that really helps with a lot of the use cases. But ultimately, I think the real game changer is the ability to use tools. And at the same time, in terms of emerging tech and things that are changing that could really, really affect the performance of LLMs, is data. These systems are trained on data. They're as good as the data and the task they have been trained on. So data regulation and curating, data is the new gold. So the moment you have access to these types of data, you can train an LLM to basically copy the patterns in that data. So I think that's another trend that we're going to be observing.
Yeah, look, I think we've touched off some of the headline items, right? A lot of the emerging technologies are around securing the data and isolating data and encrypting it while it's in process, or federated processing, and there's a variety of different methods and technologies that will come out, and that CIOs are going to be asking for, right, in terms of securing private data. Smaller language models as well. So you see Apple going in a different direction where they're putting small language models on devices, on phones. Now, that's not going to scale up in terms of an enterprise application, but it's an interesting trend. And I think you will see smaller language models fitting into niche activities and niche platforms, right? And we've already touched off a customization for specific domains. So having a domain-specific large language model that is fine-tuned for a particular organization. Not every insurance company is going to have the same needs or the same products. So therefore, you can't really use the same LLM in every case. Well, you can, but you're going to get general responses and general answers rather than very specific transactional type answers. So I think it's going to go in that direction. Fine tuning is going to be part of the vocabulary. Specific domains for particular industry sectors are going to be available. And that's the exciting bit. That'll increase accuracy, reduce latency and response times, and it'll leave the data within the control of the organizations themselves.
Thank you, Derek. Before we move into the second topic, which is the pitfalls in adopting AI and how to avoid them, David, could you run a second poll so we can get engaged a bit with the audience? And
sure, yeah. I'll pop back on the screen here. Great discussion so far. Okay, so let me launch the second poll. Hopefully everyone can see that. So question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge organizations face when integrating AI into their CX strategy? So can I invite everyone just to take a look through that and give us your thoughts? Okay, so I think we have a clear leader there so far. Right, still a few more people to vote. Half the people have voted so far, so if you're online there, just give it a read. Okay. Interesting. Okay, another couple of seconds and then we'll stop and share the poll. Okay, I'm going to stop and share the poll and get the opinions of the panel.
Right. It's very interesting to see that nobody voted for bias and fairness. I would have guessed that it would have gotten some votes at least, because bias is one of those things that it's a very hot topic, and it's true actually that there exists some bias in those models that basically depict the bias that we have in the training data. Most of the times, those models don't come up with that stuff by themselves, but that's really what stands out. And obviously, 53% is misunderstanding the AI capabilities. That's a very common pitfall of over promising technology and under delivering. It happens a lot, especially with new technologies. It's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think that what we're seeing is that we're at the top of the hype cycle, to quote the Gartner chart, right? And we're just about to hit into the pit of disillusionment, I think. But let's try and avoid that. But I think there's a natural excitement and momentum behind this. There's huge, social media exposure and articles one after another, and in some cases vendors don't help by setting a very high expectation in terms of what the AI is capable of doing, right? So I think, from our perspective, we recognize the integration complexity. We touched off that as well, that, if you have data in silos in different parts of your organization and your AI use case depends on those data sources, that can be a challenge. And there could be who owns that data? Is it fresh and up to date? Who maintains it? How do we connect to it? Is it available when the AI needs it? It can turn into a big, hairy IT project if you're not careful. And again, there are some great sweet spot use cases around AI, both on the virtual agent and the AI evaluator space in terms of the quality assessment space, and in agent assist in terms of real-time agent assist. But again, if you don't understand what it's capable of and where the edges are of the technology, your project is in danger, right? And I saw an article recently. There was a large international law firm did a survey of 600 CEOs across the globe of large enterprises, and 50% of their AI projects were stopped because they weren't either fully executed and delivered, or they came up short on expectations. So, not too surprised to see the scores come out.
Great. Okay, I'll let you close the poll and I'll let you continue then.
Thank you, David. So, Derek, what do you think, based on the results that we got from the panel too, the most common misconceptions that enterprises have about AI and how they would integrate it in their CX strategy?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what we're seeing is that, CFOs and the finance side of the house is sometimes driving some of these conversations and projects, right? And the common misconception is it's a plug-in. I can just plug it into my technology ecosystem and it will save the organization money instantaneously, right? And we just know that that's not the case. It's not been true of other technologies that have come along in the past, and it's certainly not true of AI. So the hype is tending to set an expectation among the financial community that this is going to save headcount, it's going to reduce my costs, and it's going to do it very quickly, and just let's get on with it, right? And as I mentioned earlier, I think vendors are not helping it in some cases. I think we have to be careful about the claims we make for the technology, and the conversation in the marketplace needs to be a little bit more realistic. I think one other common misconception is perhaps that on the user side of the equation, there is a need for deep understanding of prompt engineering and some of the really technical aspects of AI. That shouldn't be the case, is our expectation. We think that if it's deployed and made available through platforms in the right way, such as the Moveo chatbot, or in our case, the Scorebuddy QA platform. If we put it in the hands of the user community in such a way that they can access it easily and it's relatable, right? Then I think, there isn't a huge learning curve for end users to climb, right? The operational users of this technology. It's our job to make it accessible and easy. So I think, that may be a misconception that, I have to take a Google course on prompt engineering to get this stuff. That shouldn't be the case, guys. Like I say, it's our job as purveyors of the technology to make it easy and accessible.
Right, and from my side, I would say the biggest misconception that we mostly come across, especially after talking with customers and people that want to adopt the technology, is that they believe Gen AI is a child of God. let's say, right? It's not going to make mistakes. It's going to work out of the box, no matter how the data looks or what accesses is available. It is always going to deliver, simply because of their own experience. They go to ChatGPT. Everybody has used it, right? And it works amazing. But the problem is that in an enterprise setting, where there is a specific task or a goal, and you can only reply based on given documents, let's say, or something that exists in your knowledge base, that database or wherever it exists, it's a vastly different task. It's very hard to control the LLM, and many times, and I'm sure everybody here in this podcast has experienced GPT lying to them, for example, when it gets cornered, when it gets faced with a tough question, for example, and it tries to, very eloquently still continue the discussion. But this is unacceptable for an enterprise case, right? This is only going to increase support tickets and maybe create liabilities for the company. So I would say this is the biggest misconception, that Gen AI is a flick of a switch and it's just gonna solve everything and it's never gonna make a mistake. That's mostly what we come across.
And Panos, do you have any best practices for ensuring smooth integration with their systems?
Right. I mean, integrating Gen AI generally, the general principle that you have to define goals before you even start on something still applies with Gen AI, let's say, kind of initiatives, right? You have to define clear objectives and what sets, the criteria for success, for failure, and what are you trying to achieve. But I would say what's specific for Gen AI and LLMs and how you're adopting them is making sure you have a good data governance pipeline and data accessibility. So you shouldn't expect that the AI or Gen AI or the LLM is going to be able to reply to questions that it doesn't have access in the raw information, right? So there needs to be, if there's data silos, Gen AI is not going to be useful for your organization. And then a big aspect is also monitoring. You can deploy your system, you can deploy an LLM that does X, Y, and Z, but then how do you make sure this system is performing reliably and well? Because in the past, especially older ML, NLP, AI algorithms, you used to have a confidence threshold and you were able to kind of filter by confidence. That doesn't exist anymore with LLMs. So how do you actually monitor that you have some quality assurance in the outputs of the LLM? That's very tricky.
Yeah, look, I think the use case that you choose to experiment or deliver with, the project, scope is really, really important. So if you start with something that is much more manageable, that's a well-defined use case with clear goals. So in other words, knowing what a successful deployment looks like, but also with a risk register to say, well, okay, what could go wrong with this, and how do I measure for that as well? Back to Panos's, mentioning the potential to do brand damage, right, is very high if you go with a big bang solution that's customer facing right across all channels. So, I would suggest that the best way to learn and to prove the case is to take a high value, low risk use case and deploy that and learn from that exercise, right? That'll give management confidence then to go to bigger projects. And it'll also teach the pitfalls then of rolling out AI in an enterprise environment.
Derek, you talked about measuring the results. What do you think are the key metrics that organizations should choose?
It depends. I suppose. Look, it depends. It depends on. It depends on, is it an automation exercise or is it an augmentation exercise? And depending on where you're applying the AI, it's going to have different measures. So if we're talking about automation and the objective is to take customer conversations and customer queries and to automate those to take them to conclusion and to deliver on the customer service expectation, then your measurements are going to be in terms of calls handled, calls deflected, the number of calls to get through to live agents at the end of the process, It could be the sentiment, first call resolution, etc. So you have some traditional contact center metrics in there that you will be looking for. And then you have some new metrics that are specific to a virtual agent deployment or to an automated quality assessment process that you might implement. I think in terms of automation, again, how many calls or conversations get through to my CSOs? A big project might be looking at headcount and saying, can I grow my company with the same number of CSOs, or can I reduce my number of CSOs? And CSAT is a big metric for automation. So if I'm automating and on the face of it, I'm reducing the number of tickets that get through to my agents, if I'm doing damage to my CSAT score, then that's not a good outcome. So I think it's a blend of traditional measures and some new measures. If it's augmentation, then what you're doing is you're assisting or you're augmenting the capabilities of your agents or your users. In the case of agents, it's probably real-time information coming to them on their screen saying, don't forget this, ask about this, here's a piece of information that may help you in handling this call. And in that case, again, it's a CSAT measure that you're interested in. It might be first call resolution, so how often do I get recalls on that same ticket? And you would expect then that there would be higher personal productivity. So metrics around that. How do I measure the performance of agents in terms of productivity when I'm providing them with real-time assistance? And finally, the quality evaluator would be looking at augmentation as well, reducing the time to score, reducing the number of scores that they have to do, but still getting a very broad view across all conversations as to what's happening in those conversations. So, like I say, a mix of traditional metrics that contact centers are well used to, with the addition of some new ones in there to make sure that we're doing no harm with their AI deployments.
Yep, that's absolutely correct, Derek, and I couldn't agree more. Again, there is no one size fits all, right? It really depends on the use case, and wearing the Moveo hat right now and what we have seen people do, especially on how they evaluate their chatbots. It's really 3 or 4 metrics that most companies are trying to religiously track and have alerts on if something goes bad. But it's around coverage, how many times the virtual agent understands correctly, containment, which tied with deflections, how many of those conversations are contained within that dialogue or conversation, and they don't have to be escalated to a human, for example. In CSAT, those surveys are extremely important. The unfortunate thing with CSAT and what we've observed is that usually if you have a chatbot, the percentage of CSAT ratings ranges between 7% and 15% if you do a very good job at asking for those ratings. And typically the people that do grade the conversation or their experience, they either hate it or they love it. So nobody's going to rate you if you do your job, right? So a lot of the times we have problems, making and basing decisions on just 15% of data. But obviously, if you go to humans and you're just grading humans, it's a little higher than bots. But it's one of the challenges, let's say, of a good evaluation pipeline that gives clarity on 100% of the data. And that's all about how enterprise grade the solution that you choose to adopt is, and giving you visibility across the spectrum and not on limited amount of data. But that's mostly it.
Thanks, Panos. And before we move into the third topic, which is how to adopt the CX AI agent in your systems, David, could you run a third poll to see the results?
Yeah, no problem. So our third and final one, I'm just going to get the poll up now. Okay, so this one here, the question is, what aspect of AI integration into customer experience are you most interested in learning about? So if I can ask everyone that's online, take a couple of moments to give us your feedback on this poll, please. First one there is roles most impacted by AI, or is it the initial steps for adopting an AI agent, or planning for a phase, alignment, or finally the best practices? So Okay, so I think there's interesting initial results coming through there. So I see about over 50% of people have voted now, so we give it another couple of moments. We have a clear winner. Okay, another 5 seconds and then I'll end that. Okay, and I'll stop that. So I'm going to end the poll. And again, Derek, maybe we start with you then. Any surprises?
No, not really. I mean, I suppose it sort of mirrors the first poll that we did where, 45-50% of organizations were hoping to do something and trying to find a project to work with. So initial steps in adopting, for the AI agent, I think, we feel that we're going to see AI hit the contact center first on the virtual agent front in terms of the types of products that Moveo deliver, that sort of intelligent agent that can handle increasing numbers of automated conversations with customers. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that that's at the top there. I think the second phase will be agent assist, real-time assist, and then it's going to flow down the organization into the operational aspects of it. Yeah, I'm not overly surprised. Aligning with business goals, always a challenge, goes back to the use case definition and making sure that you do something meaningful with high value so that you can actually test the effectiveness of the solution, right? Panos, have you view?
Right. No huge surprises from my side either. It kind of aligns with what we have seen from talking to a lot of customers. There is, as a company, we sell a product, right? But, we have Gen AI and we're pushing it for enterprises. But in pretty much all the enterprises that we speak with, there is a consulting, let's say, quote unquote, phase that we're trying to also guide them on the initial steps and how the technology work and what are the limitations around it. So no huge surprise that, there's a lot of people that are trying to adopt it, but they're still at the very initial steps because it's a new technology. It has limitations and risks, and people just need to understand what these are before they actually go full on and deploy something that maybe doesn't work, maybe they have compliance issues and so forth.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I'll close the poll and hand it back to you, Panagotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, David. So most of the audience was interested in the first steps that organizations should take to implement the agent. So Derek, would you like to give us your view on that?
Yeah, look, we touched off it. There's the promise and the potential here to automate higher numbers of inbound conversations with customers, which means a couple of things, right? It means that agents are more likely to get more complex conversations. So as we increase the complexity of the automated conversations, the ones that actually get through to agents for resolution are, by definition, they're going to be more complex. So training of agents, support of agents with real-time assistance is going to affect their work practices and experience, right? The second user that I would see being affected is the QA evaluators, right? So as auto scoring becomes more effective and more accurate, you're going to have a shorter time to score. You're going to release that evaluator resource to target more specifically what they want to identify. So if you have a lot of data coming through from, let's say, an AI evaluator, that has to be analyzed. And also evaluators will be concerned about, and Panos touched off this as well, somebody has to audit and moderate the virtual agents as well, and the conversations those virtual agents are having. And there's sort of high profile examples of where an airline, was giving away refunds outside of normal policies, but it was doing it through a bot, or there was brand damage done to DPD because somebody was playing around with their bot. So there is a requirement to make sure that the bots are actually performing to expectation and giving the correct answers and experience to our customers. So we think there's going to be a new channel there almost that evaluators will be responsible for. And then finally, data analysts. So I think there's going to be a lot more data generated at the front end with these AI solutions, and the data analysts are going to probably need AI tools to help them with, and analyzing those trends and predicting, for instance, it should be possible to predict CSAT and NPS outcomes using the data across multiple conversations. So that'll be interesting. And sentiment is something that would be much more, I suppose, it'll be a metric that we will be much more used to and will have access to and visibility of. And so that will play into some decisions that organizations are going to make about their brand, their products, and their service delivery.
Perfect. Yeah. And thanks, Derek. And I think that's very interesting. And from our side, I can say, the roles that I see getting mostly affected by Gen AI in general is the obvious use case is customer support. Customer support agents are going to be much more efficient, either talking to multiple people at the same time through agent assist, or, not having to even deal with mundane tasks at all. But I also believe, and that's very subjective again, that we're going to see how chatbots and Gen AI and LLM agents, if you want to call them that, go beyond customer support. They can go into increasing revenue or decreasing churn for SaaS-based companies, and can be a very, very, very powerful tool that is not only helping organizations reduce cost, but also increase more revenue.
Thanks, Panos. And what do you think are the best practices for integrating an AI agent in an existing system?
Well, I think I have to agree with what Derek mentioned before. Start small, start with something that gives a lot of value, but is also manageable, and you don't need an army of people to maintain and make sure that it delivers value, and then expand into more complex use cases that involve access to your database or something that's much more elaborate and require it's time intensive. So start small is my advice, with data that you have readily available. It's extremely easy to test something nowadays. Like everybody has a website or everybody has a PDF that they can just drag and drop and test how that will look like. And make sure that before you start, you have your data ready. Because you might want to automate something, or you might want the LLM agent to be able to reply to something that is not going to be able to unless it has access to the data. That's my advice there.
Yeah, from my point of view, I would bow to Panos' superior experience in this area in terms of delivering AI agents, right? I know he has some really strong use cases, but I know that they were pre-prepared and carefully rolled out. So it goes back to this issue of a friction in a project like this is going to happen if your data is not all in one place. So start with a high value, low risk, relatively low effort project, and see and test the edges of that use case, and see what sort of customer response you get. There's going to be differences in different categories of customer and their reaction to using AI virtual agents and bots, right? So you need to know that you're talking to the right people and that they still have alternative channels if that's not working for them. So the same considerations that you would give to any new channel in a contact center. Is it performing the task I want it to? Are my customers responding well to it? Is it improving CSAT, not disimproving CSAT? And then doing a risk analysis after that and finding other projects. So yeah, look, common sense stuff, I think.
You both talked about data being proper. Would you say that's the first step that organizations should take?
I think we're all on a learning curve here, right? So vendors are trying to stay ahead of the customer's requirements and to learn from customers who are early adopters and from projects that we get involved in. So one of the things we did was working with one of our clients. We took 1,000 conversations that were previously scored by human evaluators, and then we ran the same question set using an AI evaluator, and we compared and contrasted, right? So it was clear that there are sweet spot questions that the AI gets exactly right. And then there was another cohort of questions where the AI got it 90% right, which is probably good enough, but it didn't cover 100% of the questions. So there's still that, cutting your cloth and making sure that it's fit for purpose. And so I suppose what our view of the world is that you shouldn't have to dramatically change your workflows and practices to fit the AI solution. The AI should support those work practices because they're established, presumably they're aligned with your business needs. And if you're changing your business needs to fit the AI model, that's probably not a good thing. So I think the first step is understand what's possible, get your data organized, and then roll out a small, manageable, measurable project.
Pan, I see that you're agreeing.
No, I completely agree. I mean, data is extremely important. Ultimately, they guide the LLM's responses. On the first hand, if you're trying to, let's say, automate things, you need data, right? That's the ground truth for the LLM to be able to reply to. And then if you're trying to train your own LLMs, for instance, you need to make sure that you have, let's say, diverse data that actually depict how the real world looks. Otherwise, you end up with a biased model. So yeah, it's really important to have data and have the correct data regulation pipeline as well. So yeah, I completely agree, actually.
I mean, one other piece of advice: work with a skilled vendor. Work with somebody who will work closely with you to develop out. There is, as Panos says, there's always that little professional services component at the front end where you need to test the value proposition on any given project. And if you're working with a skilled vendor, they should be able to help you with that. If they can't, they're not the partner you want to work with, right?
Exactly. And Derek, another piece of advice that's very relevant, we have seen, maybe to put out a virtual agent in production, I need to connect my database. And, I keep talking about data, and just integrating my database is expensive. And, and there's an expensive setup cost, but just mock the data. I mean, you have the data, just make a game. Life is a game of compromise. You have to mock the data, get something up and running with a static snapshot of your database. Just convince yourself that it's working before you have developers actually connecting the different systems together and making something that you're like, oh my God, doesn't even work for me. You know how your data looks. You can easily create a test for a single user and just play with that. That's a much cheap. Fail fast is my advice with all these kind of projects.
Yeah.
So my last question is, how can companies approach the initial planning phase to ensure that they are aligned with their overall business goals? Panos, your take.
Well, I would say, in terms of planning, right? Companies should start always with, and it's a very generic advice, but start with the problem and work backwards. It's really important that everybody that's trying to adopt Gen AI, they have a clear understanding of what exactly they're trying to achieve. They don't expect that it's going to solve every auxiliary problem that they have in their business. That I would say is the most important phase within planning. At the initial first steps, make sure that you know what you're trying to solve, and start from the problem backwards. Not because Gen AI is cool, let's apply Gen AI, sprinkle Gen AI everywhere without even having to, right? That's my advice here.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think standard project management practice, start with a business case that makes sense to your organization, and then work back from that. Usually the business case it's a return on investment conversation. It's what problem am I solving and how much is it costing me to solve that problem? So, I think normal standard program management practice should apply. risk analysis. We talked about brand damage for poorly executed AI. Don't go big bang. Keep your risk contained. And again, choose the starting point. Experiment. So a lot of the conversations we're having with our customer base is, let's experiment. Let's do something small, make it work. And again, that gives you the ammunition, if you like, to go back to the C-suite and go, listen, guys, here's where it works. It's not going to work in this area of the business, so stop asking. So I think there needs to be the operational managers need to get their hands dirty with the potential of this Gen AI product, and then they'll have the conversation and the ammunition to talk to the C-suite and go, look, I found a great use case for this. It won't cost the company an arm and a leg. We don't have to put 10 developers on it, and it's actually going to deliver in a relatively short time frame.
Thank you both. David, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I'm just going to put myself back on screen here. Great conversation so far. We have time just for one question, and the question came in from, funny enough, a Scorebuddy customer, Dennis Eaton from Verus.ai, and actually, funny enough, Dennis is also attending on our panel discussion for our next webinar next month. So Dennis has asked specifically for you, Panos, question for Panos. How did you improve, or how do you improve reducing hallucinations with your LLM versus ChatGPT? He sees this as a huge issue with early AI solutions. So Panos, your thoughts on that?
Exactly. That's a very common problem, because there is a misconception that a chatbot or a virtual agent has one LLM, all right, or it does one call to the LLM. In reality, when we talk in enterprise, we have a huge pipeline after the LLM synthesizes a response. So we have a step of, a big pipeline of 5 or 6 steps that guarantees basically that response that got generated actually adheres and is coming from the grounded knowledge. It would be crazy to put ChatGPT out there and ask it, given that prompt, reply to me, like given a set of documents. Well, actually, we did try that, and we have the scar tissue, and we know better now. But that's how we do guarantee that. And on top of that, there is obviously custom training for our own LLM with a certain set of objectives, and constitutional AI when we generate those data that we train our LLM on. So it's a huge pipeline, basically, that I can tell you, that's enterprise grade. It can go, and it's not going to hallucinate, and it's not going to go off script, because we don't allow it to do that, because the LLM is just one piece in a very big pipeline.
Great. Derek, yeah.
So yeah, look, you hear conversation about guardrails, right? And I think really, Panos, you're describing there a set of checks and balances that look at the response from the LLM and filter out as best you can any inappropriate or inaccurate responses. It's probably a new line item in the project plan for most organizations, guardrails, but yeah, you need to have those in place, particularly if it's a customer-facing AI interface.
Super, great. Well, listen, we're at time now, bang on, at least here it's 5 p.m. So just to thank Derek and Panos, wonderful discussion, and Panagotcha for hosting us, really great. And thanks to everyone who has attended. And this is being recorded, don't worry, we'll send out a recording and it'll be available on both the websites. And as you leave today is a quick survey, so if you wouldn't mind filling in that survey, very valuable to us for future webinars. So again, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Bye everybody. Thanks for listening.